So tonight, I want to talk about cylinder heads and cylinder heads. It's a really huge and essential and important and critical part of the engine, right? When you're talking about running the car down the road, you've got four major parts of the tune-up. I mean, you've got clutches and gearboxes and drive shafts, and differentials and tires and brakes and suspension, all that kind of stuff. But within the power plant, underneath the bonnet, you've got four considerations: emissions, as great or as slight as they are; engine, ignition, and fuel. And this has to do with the engine. You got the bottom end part of the engine, that's the crankshaft and the pistons. And sitting on top of the engine is the cylinder head. Cylinder head's got valves in it and the spark plugs. So the valves open up a certain amount and let a certain amount of air fuel come in when the piston is on its downward stroke. Exactly how much air gets in, which is rated by volumetric efficiency, which is less the faster the engine goes. The function of the valves and the carburetors and the inlet manifold, but within the cylinder head itself, the curves and the impediment to smooth flowing air fuel mixture, which we'll call the gas, as solid liquid gas, is that kind of gas. It's really critical that the inside of the cylinder head is good. And that's what makes the difference between an engine which runs really great and one which doesn't run really great at speed, at power, when you're trying to extract a certain amount of power out of this engine. Remember that the B series engine, which I talk about most of the time, was available in all kinds of British vehicles at the time and in other cars in the United States, including the Nash Metropolitan. Go figure. So that was a 1500 engine, and that's got a cylinder head on it with valves about as big around as your thumb. They are tiny, tiny, tiny little valves, and it's great up through about 45 miles an hour. But if you want to go faster, you have to have bigger valves. So the biggest inlet valve that we end up with on the MGB is about 1 5/8 inches. And that's only used for a couple of years. There's a magic relationship between the airflow, getting the airflow into the engine, and the diameter of the valves. Just offhand, the larger the valves, the more air you're going to get into the engine. But you've also got not fluid dynamics, but gas dynamics at work. And you've got a column of air which is rushing through the carburetor, and it gets into a speed. There's a certain force behind that. There's a certain momentum in that air fuel mixture. And when that valve pops open, there's some pressure built up there that pushes that air fuel mixture through the valve and into the opening cylinder with increasing displacement till the valve finally closes, and then the piston reverses direction and it goes up into the compression stroke. So I've got a cutaway cylinder head here. This is you'll recognize this as the very front side of an MGB cylinder head. So we've got what's left of the thermostat housing up here, right? And then we've got a couple of cutaways here for where the valve guides go. A comment about valve guides. In the beginning, they were cast iron valve guides. And when we lost the lead in the gasoline around 1975, it was like, oh no, we're not going to be able to drive our cars again. There it goes. You know, we need the lead for lubrication. Nobody explained exactly how the lead lubricated the exhaust valves, but they were always talking about the inlet valves. And that's between the stem and the inside of the valve guide. So it's like, oh, we got to come up with a different valve guide, different valve guide, which is slipperier there won't be any problem between the valve stem and the valve guide. So phosphor bronze, those gold colored ones, came into fashion. They're horrible. As it turns out, they're horrible. As it turns out, the cast iron guides are the best guides. So don't buy the gold color phosphor bronze valve guides. Buy the cast iron ones. Why? Because the coefficient of expansion on the phosphor bronze guides causes them to tighten up. The inside diameter gets smaller, and it will grab the valve stem and hold the valve open, or gall the valve, so it gets stuck in place. So to make sure that this doesn't happen, the clearance between the valve stem and the valve guide is opened from the workshop manual suggestion of half a thousandths, 5/10,000ths, to about 2 or 3 thousandths, at which point the valve is now wobbling. Not much, but it wobbles. And so when it goes to sit back down on its seat, it doesn't always sit in the same place or in the right place. And it wobbles. Of course, now the phosphor bronze guide will not grab, gall, cause the valve to stick. I've had that happen on my own vehicle. At idle, we were bringing the cars in during the winter so many years ago up on Fulton Street, and I had my car idling, waiting for moving in another car, and all of a sudden it started to run on three, and you could hear it tick, 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 tick. It's way excessive valve clearance, and I took the cylinder head, I took the valve cover off, and found the valve partway open, and of course the valve latch had increased from 15 thousandths to, I don't know, 100 thousandths. And here's this rocker flapping around on the inside of the head, the valve cover, not doing anything, and the valve was just stuck open. So it even happened on my own car. I know this happened. So use the cast iron guides. Use them with that Felpro umbrella seal. Now there's an umbrella seal that'll fit the T-type heads, the X-Bag and X-Bag heads. There's one that'll fit the Midget heads. Used to come in the head gasket set, those umbrella seals. And then the Felpro SS70373 seals that you can use on the MGB. Those are the nuts. And the reason that you use a umbrella oil seal on the inlet guide, you don't need one on the exhaust, but if you're going to put it on 4 of them, you might as well put it on 8 of them. There's 8 of them that come in the box at least. Is to keep the oil, which is sloshing all around on the inside of the valve cover, all around the springs and so forth, is to keep that from getting on the stem and getting sucked down between the stem and the guide and getting into the cylinder, where it's then burned up. So you end up smoking a little bit out of the back end, and you get a certain amount of oil consumption. The vacuum underneath the exhaust valve is just enormous, and it'll suck the oil right down between the stem and the guide there. So that's why you use the umbrella oil seal. It's far better than the original system that they had, which was some shrouds, some conical shrouds, again, to keep the oil off the top of the guide so it wouldn't get sucked down through there. So when you're talking about porting and polishing, which some people do, I don't try to get a picture here. This is the inlet. This is the inlet. You can see here the square. The square is our outlet, is our exhaust, and the round one here is our inlet. And I haven't got good enough light here to maybe to show you, but you can see that there's some roughness. There's some roughness here on the casting. Not bad, but there's some roughness. And that roughness distorts the flow of the air fuel mixture. So it only makes sense to polish this away. On the other hand, you don't want to polish it too much. If it's actually polished, like mirror smooth, like that kind of polish, then it's too polished, and the gasoline will drop out of suspension. It needs just a little bit of turbulence, not much, just a little bit of turbulence next to the wall. So when people talk about porting and polishing a head, which you should do if you have the money to do it when the cylinder head is off, it isn't so much polishing as it is porting and just smoothing it out on the inside, but not mirror smooth. The exhaust can be mirror smooth. That's great. As a matter of fact, it's just as, or maybe even depending on who you talk to, more important to open up the exhaust port than opening up the inlet port. So here we have the inlet port here. You can see this. See this huge area here, okay? Where the valve, of course, sits on the bottom. You can see where the valve sits. Here's the exhaust over on the other one. But look at how much smaller the area is to get the exhaust gases out than it is to get the inlet gases in. Now it's a pump. I mean, you got a piston coming up and you force those gases out. But in forcing the gases out, you increase the temperature on the underside of the head here. So you don't want to have too much temperature in here, or you can end up with pre-ignition. That is the something other than the spark plug igniting the air fuel mixture, like happens in a diesel engine. That's the advantage of the new aluminum cylinder heads that are out there right now, is you can jack your compression up to 8.5 to 1, no problem, because you're getting rid of all this excess heat that's up in the top of the cylinder. Those aluminum heads are good. Put on a flow bench, and that is to test how much air you can get through the cylinder head at whatever pressure you're hunting for, and whatever valve opening you're looking for. You don't want a great big hole coming up to the valve, because you don't get any velocity of the air, and the air won't stack. The air won't, you lose the momentum of the air. I back off a little bit, and people say, well, if you want to go faster, just get a bigger carburetor. Well, if the carburetor is the impediment to getting air fuel into the engine, yeah, get a bigger carburetor. But in the case of the MGB engine, it's not the impediment getting into the engine. It's not that. It's around where the inlet valve is on the inside of the cylinder head. That's the literal bottleneck. It's not the size of the carburetor. So putting 1 3/4 carburetors on your MGB doesn't necessarily make it go faster. Matter of fact, it might make it run more poorly at low RPM, because you haven't got enough velocity of the air across the bridge on the inside of the carburetor to evaporate the gasoline. So anyway, there are instructions, and there are people that know exactly how to port and polish this head, and how to make it breathe as well as you ever might want to make it breathe. Now you can cheat, and instead of using atmospheric pressure to push, because there is no such thing as vacuum, correct? There's only pressure, right? There's no such thing as dark. There's only light. There's no such thing as cold. There's only heat. But sometimes it works better in our explanation if we talk about suction. But in fact, it isn't suction, it's air pressure. So you've got 16 pounds or 14 some odd pounds of air pressure pushing through here, pushing the air fuel mixture into the engine. And if you increase that by a couple of pounds with a supercharger, you can blow a whole lot more air inside the cylinder than you would normally aspirated. So if you're looking for a silver bullet to go faster, you buy the supercharger, the Eaton blower. Oh, it's just the nuts. It's great. You can put it on. You don't have to rebuild your engine. You don't even have to change the cam. Just put it on, bolt it on. The downside is it's not a silver bullet. It's a platinum bullet. I don't know how much they are right now, but I bet they're around $5 grand or so. It's pretty easy to install. But anyway, that's one way of getting around. You don't have to port and polish the head anymore. You don't have to because you can blow more air fuel inside the engine. But you do have the problem of getting the exhaust gases back out of the engine, and having those exhaust ports opened up is really important. Now, normally, when you take the head off the engine, why would you take the head off the engine? Because you think you got a bad valve, you got zero compression. I just had a guy send me a picture of a cylinder head, a T-type cylinder head, with maybe 500 miles on the engine. Maybe it was 500 miles starting in 1986. Maybe the engines it sat still for a long time. And whenever the engine sits still, two valves are always open. No matter where you leave the engine in its rotation, naturally, two valves are always open, and those valves will rust. So if you've taken an engine which hasn't run in years and years, and you do make it run, you want to make it run for a while. You want to make it run for oh gosh, 20 minutes before you decide to take the cylinder head back off. Because if it's just rusted, between the seat and the valve, running it for 20 minutes will bang that rust off there and it'll reseal. Anyway, I just got this picture of the cylinder head, and they had zero compression in one of the cylinders, and the complaint was that they'd blown a head gasket. So okay, that's weird, but okay. So anyway, there was a lot of carbon on the inside of that head. We redid an engine one time years ago for a guy, and he, we ran it in the shop, and then gave it to him in a crate. He put it in his car, and then within 500 miles he calls up and says, "Oh my gosh, the compression on one of the valves is one of the cylinders is zero." And he sent the head back to us. Fair enough. And I sent it back to my machine shop, and the guy goes, "Oh my gosh, the guy had his car adjusted so rich that there was so much carbon on the valve that the carbon actually interfered with how the valve closed. Therefore, when you did a compression check, you got zero compression in that cylinder." Anyway, this picture that I got the other day on email or on maybe on text or something, but I wondered if that might be the problem there. But when you take your head off, for whatever reason you're taking your head off, you want to do some things to your cylinder head before you put it back on. Normally, you'd send it to the machine shop and have the valves um, um, redone. New valve guides and or valve seats. There are no valve seats in an original cylinder head. You can have hardened seats installed. You only need hardened seats on the exhaust. The inlet valve never gets hot, not that hot, because it's always awash with an ice cold mixture of gasoline and air. That air fuel mixture comes in, and it's extremely cold when it comes in. So the inlet valve doesn't ever get too hot, but the exhaust valve certainly does. That's the valve that that you get valve recision from, where the valve recedes into the cylinder head because of the failure of the valve or a failure of the seat or both. That can be negated by putting in hardened valve seats. Real common, machine shops do it all the time. Once in a blue moon, they do it wrong and the valve seat will come loose. Had that happen on my own car one time. It starts to make a tremendous amount of rattling. Anyway, you get the hardened seats installed. And it also takes care of tiny, tiny little cracks that naturally occur around the exhaust seat because of the extreme heat that's in there. So you can get the machine shop to do a valve job and put a triple cut on the valves so that the airflow is real nice and everything. But if I don't know, you're changing the cylinder head gasket because it leaks because of glue between two cylinders. Of course, at that point, you'd want to take the head and have it surfaced. to make sure that the bottom of the head was absolutely flat. You can't do that with a block very easily. You can have a block surface, but you can take it out of the car and all the way apart to have the top of the block decked or surfaced to make sure that when you put the cylinder head gasket in there, that it's sandwiched between two absolutely parallel surfaces. But the things you do on any cylinder head, this MGB one, including, is any place that you might have a threaded hole. A threaded hole, you want to chamfer those threaded holes. And you want to run a die down or a tap down in there and just make sure that it's all cleaned out. 5/16 24 or 5/16 18, depending on the thread. 5/16 18 is up here in front on the thermostat. 5/16 24 is the size of the holes here. You chamfer these because when you tighten up, say, the bolt here, which holds the rocker assembly in place, and you tighten that up all the way, and that bolt's trying to go in there as tightly as it can, then the hole that it's going into rises up to meet the bolt. Not very much, but a thousandth or two. You put a file across there and file it, and you get a nice little ring around that hole. You can see where it's lifted. And if you chamfer it with just a 45-degree chamfering tool, and then chase the threads after it, then you don't get that lifting. This is absolutely critical on the MGB cylinder head, on the underside, in the holes through which the studs go that hold the cylinder head tight against the block. So these holes that hold the studs, there's 11 of them on a B, and 9 of them on this one, and this one. 11 on this, 9 on a Midget, 10 on a T-type, 10 on a twin cam, 11 on a Cooper mini engine. But you want to chamfer the underside. You want to chamfer the underside where the head gasket comes up and touches it. You want to make sure that has got a nice chamfer to it, so that when you pull the cylinder head down against the block and the gasket then begins to move, you're taking that cylinder head gasket and squishing it. Therefore, it's going to move outwards or inwards. You want to make sure there's someplace for it to go. And there is a problem with MGB cylinder heads where they crack externally, just to the front or the rear of the center stud on the right-hand side, between the second and third spark plug. And it's because as you begin to tighten up the cylinder head, it bows. The gasket bunches right there at that one stud, not the other studs, that stud. And as you tighten it down, the cylinder head bows, not that much, only a little tiny bit, but it stresses it, and that's what causes the external crack. So, and it also causes it to leak. If you go to a car show, you look at all the MGBs with the bonnets open, unless they've just cleaned the right-hand side of their engine. Half of them, there's some weeping. There's always stains on the right-hand side of the engine where the head is not really that as tight as it should be to the block. And that's because the cylinder head gasket bunches at that center stud. So chamfer the underside, absolutely. So you just get it clean. You grind out all the carbon. We used to do that all the time. Lap the valves in. For any time the cylinder head's off, you lap the valves in. Oh my gosh! Of course, you got to have a tool to get the valves out of the head. But if you're that intense that you've got the cylinder head off your engine, you very well have a valve spring tool. What else can I mention? There's the larger the inlet valve nominally, the better the airflow. So there's a 1 5/8 valve that was used from 71 through 73 on the MGBs. That's the valve you want to go for. If you're getting it ported and polished, you can take a Nash Metropolitan head, and you can, I don't know what the displacement is. You can measure it, but you have your machine shop just open it up to put in the larger 1 5/8 valves, and you can use that on your 1980 MGB. So all those cylinder heads are exchangeable. The volume of the combustion chamber remains about the same throughout the range at around 42 cc's. The cylinder head gasket, even though it's squished down to 30 thousandths, is so big around that that's about 5 cc's. There's always some volume between the top of the block and the top of the piston. Most of our MGs, not the Mark II MGAs, not the T-types, but almost all the rest of them have got a dished piston. So there can be quite a volume up in there. So when you go to check your compression ratio, you need to see what the displacement is inside the head and on the deck, that is on the top of the engine. Put that all into your formula and end up with a figure somewhere around 8.5 to 1. If you want to drift up higher, 5 horsepower for every half point of compression, wow, let's just go to 12 to 1. That works if you're doing, like 5,000 RPM, but it doesn't work at lower speeds. So there's a mechanical limit to all the kinds of things that you want to do. You want to just go faster, you buy the supercharger. Slick, fast, easy. If you want to spend a lot of time, you can port and polish the head and get the proper, jack the compression up to 9 to 1 or 9.5 to 1, get a camshaft that matches that. But then all camshafts run within a certain range. Some cams are designed to run at relatively lower speeds, maybe a couple thousand RPM. Some are designed to run at 6,000 to 8,000 RPM. Okay, so you don't get something for nothing, and you can't just throw a whole lot of parts into a project, especially when they say race car parts, and expect to have something that runs better than a standard engine when you're done. Cylinder head, clean, you can sandblast them. You can, the machine shop takes the cylinder head and puts it into what ours does, puts it into an oven and bakes it. And then anything that used to be oil, anything carbon based, is now turned into ash. They put this into a turntable and turn it, and while it's turning, they've got these jets that shoot BBs against the cylinder head. Not BBs like you remember BBs, but BBs smaller that maybe 20 of these BBs I'm talking about make up a normal BB, and they shoot it against the head and metal finish the cylinder head. It comes out looking really, really nice. You can polish the inside of the combustion chambers. Some people claim that polishing, of course, you don't see a whole lot of the inside of the chamber here because it's the heart-shaped one here, but there's a lot of it, of course, that you can't see that's up above. You can polish that. You can polish the exhaust ports up, mirror smooth if you want. You can make sure that the manifold meets the manifold is matched directly up with the cylinder head. So we've got these ports. And the question is, does the square on the exhaust manifold, does that square meet this square? Exactly. The only way to tell is to put a gasket up against the cylinder head with a stud sticking out. You get the gasket and you take your die grinder and you go around each of the holes and you make sure that it just abuts the inside edge of the gasket, and then you do the same thing with the exhaust manifold and the intake manifold. That falls into the area of blueprinting. Somebody says, "Oh, my engine's been blueprinted." means that everything's matched up the way that the designer had intended for it to be. I had a straight six and I don't remember what, some kind of car. I had the exhaust manifold off, and the exhaust manifold was tipped so badly you could see that only half of the exhaust port was lining up at the very end of this thing. It's just the tolerances on construction were just so abysmally poor that it just didn't line up. Ran just fine, ran around town okay. But if you're looking to get power out of the engine, and that's what we're looking to get, performance and power, then you've got to go for cleanliness and blueprinting and following all these instructions. Talked about the cleaning up the head and porting and polishing and the differences in the heads. There are a bunch of different heads, on the MGB engine, bunch of different heads, all having to do with the diameter of the inlet and exhaust valves, and yeah, having to do with that, and whether it's got an injector on it for the emission control system. But any head can be changed around and made to work for your engine. So I'm not going to go into all the fancy stuff that you can do, grinding away the inside of the bottom side of the valve guide. That sounds cool. You get it out of the way. Oh boy, you don't have this great big half-inch wide tube sticking down there to follow the airflow. But on the other hand, now instead of having that much distance to support your valve from wobbling, now you've only got that much, so the valve wobbles more. You don't get something for nothing. It's all a trade-off. There's a lot of good information out there, and if you want to know some more, you can call me and talk to me about your specific problem and so forth. But cylinder heads, they got to be flat. You always have to use a new gasket when you reinstall it. Gaskets go in dry. Used to be all kinds of stuff you could spray on gaskets, copper coat. You probably still buy it. But all that's unnecessary with our engines. So anyway, that's Fred, you probably have a list of all the different cylinder heads and all the different displacements and valve sizes and stuff. Or if you don't, you by this time next year you will.
I have it on the shelf behind me, but my big question is the difference between the late model heads for the low compression engines and then the earlier heads for the higher compression engines. There was a somewhat significant difference in the combustion chamber size. And they say that if you put a small combustion chamber head on a high compression block, that it makes it extremely high compression because the smaller combustion chamber, even though on a low compression cylinder, the piston is much more dished, but that combustion chamber and the top is smaller. So if you want a racing engine, you use the late head on a high compression block
with a flat top pistons.
Yeah, and that if you do that, because of the valve clearance, there has to be a little eyebrow cut out for clearance, just in case. It probably won't hit, but if you put in a more aggressive cam, it definitely will. So you need to have a little eyebrow cut out on the top of the cylinder.
So beginning with the 18V engines, their eyebrows cut, and they're just very, if you've seen them, you know what we're talking about, but they're just, oh my gosh, they can't be more than a 1/16 of an inch deep, just at the towards the middle and the outside of the outside cylinders, just to make way for the gases. I'm not sure it's for the valve itself, but it's certainly for the gases. We did one cylinder head one time, and there's a fitted height for the valves. The valves are supposed to sit at a certain height off the top, and if they sit too low, that means when they open, there's a chance of hitting the piston. We had that happen once on an engine that we built. You started to rev the thing up, and you got this really odd noise. It's like, well, something's going on. So we took the head off, and you could see where the valves had just barely touched the top of the piston. That's not the same case as on my Subaru when the timing belt broke, and you got a Hemi engine and that an MGA twin cam, and oh, that just wreaks havoc with that. But um, anyway, I think it's the earlier ones that have got the 42 cc, but there's no sub. I mean, the thickness of the cylinder heads is 3 1/8, 3 1/4 inches, and depending on how much the cylinder head's been skimmed, has a function. It, of course, controls what the volume is inside the cylinder. So anytime you're doing any kind of work, you must measure the displacement between the top of the piston and the top of the block, and the displacement inside the cylinder head, just so you know what's going on before you put it back together. But in all the time that we ever mixed and matched any cylinder head, we never had an engine which I thought ran especially worse or better, or had valve interference or any, I mean, just field experience. I mean, swapped heads around for 40 years and didn't pay much attention to which one was which, and they always worked. It wasn't as though you put it together and you go to spin the thing over and you think, oh my gosh, the compression's so high, and you check it and it's 190 or something. You know, the compression's always around 120, 130 pounds. So, but it is a consideration. So how about, so if you started to collect all the numbers and the date codes and stuff off cylinder heads yet?
I've done the date coding on some of them. But there's a very good document out on the web somewhere. Can't remember where I found it, but it goes through all the different cylinder heads and what the compression ratio is and the valves and all that stuff that goes into them. It's more for people who want to put together a high performance engine, but it gives you all the data.
Sean Brown in Oregon.
Flow speed.
Flow speed.
Yeah, that's Sean Brown. Yeah. And then Orrin Harding out of Greensboro, North Carolina, put together this list, which I put in my tech book, which is all the valve sizes and the part numbers, but it is part numbers, not casting numbers, because he drew a lot of the information out of books. So you don't get the part number, you get a casting number on the head, you know, CAM 1106 or something, and that's the only number that you can find on there. But so there is a lot of stuff you can switch around, but so much stuff has been changed, and you just don't trust anything. Before you put your engine back together, you got to measure the displacement at the top of the block and within the head, so you can figure out what compression ratio you want. T-types, the original T-types, the compression ratio was 7 1/4 to 1, because they had such crummy gasoline available. It's down around 80 octane in England at the time, and when they got here to this country, when we had ethyl, they shaved like, what, 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch off those heads. Oh my gosh, ran the compression way up. You get a lot more power out of them. But of course, they weren't designed to, some of them weren't designed to take that power. So anyway, do I have some more questions about cylinder heads?
Yes, John, I have one. You had mentioned about running a tap down through the threaded holes on the cylinder heads.
Yes.
Would it be more advisable to run a thread chaser in there as opposed to a tap? The reason I ask is a thread chaser will clean out the threads, but it won't cut new threads, where a tap will actually cut a new thread. It might not be much, and it may not make a big difference on our big whopping 95 horsepower engines, but I know on my son and I, when we built his Mustang with a 700-800 horsepower engine, we had some problems by rethreading it with a tap.
I'm to answer this, but first of all, Steve, I got to hit the mute all button. You can unmute yourself again. And yes, you can make a case for using a thread chaser. You know, not all taps seem to be the same diameter. I mean, 5/16 24, that's a SAE spec, you know, and that's what you're going for. But
Right.
I know what you mean. If you use a tap in there, you can end up making it just a little bit bigger than it was originally, and stuff
Correct.
can seem to wobble a little bit. Yes.
Yeah, I ran into that. I sold tools for a bunch of years off a tool
Okay.
truck,
Oh, all
and
right.
that's why we sold thread chasers and we sold taps. So if you can actually take a hole that's already threaded and run a tap in it, and you'll pull more threads out,
Yes.
which is going to give it a little bit more sloppiness. And like I said, on our MGs, it probably wouldn't matter, but on a high compression engine or something, I know it does make a difference. But that is something I just wanted to mention, that if you
Thank
guys
you.
are rebuilding it, you might want to run a thread chaser through there.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I'll get off my soapbox.
That's all right. That's all right. So that's okay. But it's, yeah, the whole point is you want to have that thread clean. First of all, you want to get the sand or the BBs or the dirt or the muck or whatever's in there out of there. First of all, and or sometimes you go down in there. I know I've gone down in there with a blowgun. I've got a blowgun which has got a like an 1/8 inch tubing on the end of it, so it'll get right down to the bottom of the blind hole, and you blow it, and all kinds of junk comes back out, and you go, is that left? Did they leave that in at Abingdon? You know, is that junk been at the bottom of that hole all that time? Cleanliness is next to godliness when you're building up engines, and having all the surfaces clean. One of my jokes at our local car club, I often give a technical tip, and in the springtime, it's springtime. Make sure your mating surfaces are clean. You want to make sure that all the surfaces are just as clean as you can get them, and you can do that with a sanding block, just with 100 grit, 180 grit paper. Just clean it up. But getting those threads clean. Thanks for the comment about the thread chaser.
John, does that advice about campering the holes apply to the 1275 engine as well?
Every engine in every blind hole you've got. Every engine in every blind hole you've got. And if you're doing it the blind holes, why not do it the holes that are going through plates? So there's no chance of anything rising up. So you've got nice flat surfaces. So yes, all of them, T-types, MGAs, MGBs, even MGCs. I don't know how many studs are on an MGC, a lot more. So.
John, what kind of, oh, go ahead. John, what kind of valve guides do they get for 11?
I'm gonna take Jim here, Jim Webb.
Okay.
Hey, John, you mentioned superchargers. I thought you always had to have forged pistons if you have a supercharger.
Not in practice. Not with our MGBs. Some people say, oh my gosh, I got to take my old tired engine. I've got a comment about using that adjective with an engine, but no, you take your engine and bolt a blower up to it. And I mean, if you're going to put 10 pounds of boost on it, maybe there's a problem there, you know, like, but 2 or 3 pounds of boost, you know, it's you have to have, if you want to drive an MGB at any kind of speed, you got to have one in Denver because the air is so thin up there. So
maybe that's only on high compression engines.
Maybe it's just nothing it's nothing I've ever heard of within the MG community.
Okay, thank you.
Or more importantly, or maybe more correctly, I don't remember having heard in our community. So yeah, the pistons that you buy are just you know from all the suppliers. They're just fine. So
John, our engines are pretty strong. A friend of mine who's a hot rodder, when I had my engine apart, he looked at the connecting rods and he said, "That's heavier than my Chevy engine." He couldn't believe it. So yeah, our engines can take that supercharger, no problem at all.
There's a wonderful evolution in our engines too. You start off with a connecting rod, which you can use as a counterweight for an old-fashioned window, instead of a lead weight, behind the trim. And then by the time you get up to 1980 on the latest 18V engines that we had, oh my gosh, the connecting rods are so lightweight. It's just reducing that reciprocating mass. Speaking of that, there are on the earlier car, on all the earlier cylinder heads, of course, there's dual springs, because you got to have dual springs that fit in around the valve guide to hold the valves closed, but that's not what their function is. Their function is to keep the valve train tight and keep the lifter, the cam follower, on the camshaft. Starting in 1972 with the 18V engine, they went to the 2H15, what's the part number? The bucket lifter that they used on the Midget. Now at this point, with a much, much lighter lifter, I mean lighter, like unbelievably lighter, you can reduce that spring down to get rid of the dual spring and just go to one spring. Oh boy, now you got less internal resistance to turn, therefore the engine will spin up faster. So always fit bucket lifters when you're rebuilding a B series engine, an MGA or an MGB. Always use bucket lifters, longer push rods, and at that point you can go to the lighter springs on the head too. Now I've been after the T-type community. Well, I can't remember the diameter of the lifters on there, but it's metric, and there's some engine out there that's got bucket lifters with that same diameter. It'd be wonderful to find a bucket lifter for a T-type, because those lifters are about that tall, and they're not as tall as a Healy lifter. Healy lifters feel one. They feel like they weigh a pound apiece. Take a handful of stamps to send one. But the T-type lifters are plenty heavy. So are the early MGB lifters. But those bucket lifters are so nice. Anyway, Tony.
I wonder if Len Finelli would have bucket lifters.
He's into that roller cam thing.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if he has lighter lifters too.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
You can ask him.
Yep. Jeff Schlemmer was working on roller lifters for an MGB engine. I don't know how far he got on it. I don't know. So Tony, you tried to come in quite some time ago, and I made you wait.
What kind of valve guide seals for an MG 1100 engine?
That's just the stock ones. The stock ones that come, that you're gonna get them from Mini City or something or other. I do have a Velcro part number for them, but I don't have it in front of me right now. But
okay, I can get it from you later. Okay, thank you, John.
Yeah, you're welcome.
John, your head studs or head bolts, do you oil them or not?
I do, yeah. Because you're after consistency. Those are the three big C's when you're putting an engine together: cleanliness, consistency, and confidence. Yeah, I know what I'm doing. Although I just talked to a guy day before yesterday who was taking apart an all Synchro MGB gearbox, and there are shims on the gearbox on the main shaft immediately in front of the rear bearing, which position the main shaft. So you've got these shims that position the main shaft, and it's all predicated on the position of the rear bearing, not the center bearing, but the rear bearing. So all of them should be stacked on the front side of the bearing between that rear bearing and a distance tube. And when he took his gearbox apart, he found two of them where they were supposed to be, and two of them between the bearing and the rear flange out there doing nothing. It's like, so you can have confidence in building, but you got to have you got to have a book out in front of you too. Anyway, going back to the consistency, when you go to screw that nut onto the stud, whether you've chased it with a die or a thread chaser, and you're sure that the threads are you can put them together by hand. Still, you want to make sure that when you're putting all 11 of them down, that the natural resistance to turn is the same. And just a drop of oil on there makes them move a little bit better. So I always do that, and I pull them down to 55 pounds on a B engine, B series.
In the block and on the nuts too.
Going into the block, I put a drop oil in there because you want to be able to get the thing back out again. And those you put in at about 5 pounds into the block, and then the nuts when you go to torque down the cylinder head, I do that round and round and round, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and finally at 55, and then I leave the valves open at around 30 thousandths, start the car up, let it run, start the engine up, let it run for 20, 30 minutes at about 2,000 RPM with that real wide valve lash. So everything can twirl. The lifters can twirl, the push rods can twirl, everything can sort of break in. And then at the end of that half an hour run in with a high zinc oil, then you retorque the head and readjust the valves and you're all set to go.
Hey, John?
Yes.
John? One comment I would make on installing the head is that center stud that you were talking about on the
the right hand
side.
Yeah.
I always put anti-seize on that.
Okay.
Yeah. Not in the threads, but on the shaft of it. So the head will come off again eventually.
Yeah. The MGB cylinder head is positioned by the stud which sits on the right hand side between the second and third spark plug. That locates the head on top of the block, and that's the hole that goes through the head in a 3/8 hole. It's a 3/8 stud, and the hole in the head is 3/8, marginally larger, not much. The rest of the holes are 7/16. So you can put the head on and shake it around a little bit unless that right hand stud's in place. And sometimes, if the valve cylinder head gasket is leaked a little bit, you get a little bit of coolant up through there or something or other, it can rust up, and it isn't as hard as a Triumph, because in Triumphs more than one rust. But oh boy, you can have a real. I've seen people get the heads part way off. They won't come any farther. You're using an engine hoist. You're lifting the tires almost off the ground, trying to pick the head off the top of the engine. So you take a hacksaw and go underneath and slice it. And then you get the thing up on the bench, and you can use a press or a big hammer and drive the thing out. But yeah, you can make it. I don't do that, but you can make a case for doing that. Absolutely.
I've had to use a lot of a torch and heat that up cherry red to get that thing to come loose.
Yep. Not very common, but if there's anti-seize in there or grease, more likely anti-seize, that will not happen. Correct. Any more questions about cylinder heads?
Just a quick one. Umbrella seals for the MGA also?
Yes.
1500.
Yeah.
The 1500.
Same ones. Yeah. 70373.
Yeah, I have them.
Okay.
By the way, great seminar tonight. This is a good one. I really enjoyed this one.
More fun than wheels and tires, or more fun than extinct MG suppliers. I had a real good time, Fred, and I loved that one. That was, and then I thought later on, the name I couldn't remember was John somebody at Sports and Classics in Darien, Connecticut, and then Kingsborn, which sold a whole series of of throttle cables and the choke cables and stuff, window winders, Kingsborn. Anyway, well, good. I'm glad. It's nothing turns out the participants more than SU carburetors. If I put down radiant tuning, oh boy, all of a sudden everybody's in on it, because despite all the times I've talked about it, it's still a mystery, you know. So anyway, thanks very much. Where are you calling from, Peter?
New York, Cornwall, New York.
Thanks.
About just 50 miles north of New York City. But
Okay.
I have another quick question, a little unrelated. Assembly lubricants as opposed to oil.
Yeah.
I'm told you should never use the assembly lubricant on the rings of the cylinder walls. Does that make sense? Just conventional oil instead.
My machine shop told me that they started assembling them without any oil at all. Well, I still use engine oil. I mean,
Right.
whatever you put in there is gone really fast, right?
Yeah.
But there's some talk about you know, that it'll do something to the walls. But I've heard that. And
Okay.
and I also heard of something that, you know, putting the pistons in with no, you know, just, you know, scraping, you know. But I
Couldn't do it.
usually just use oil, engine oil. Yeah.
Thank you.
All
John,
right.
those umbrella seals, I
Yes.
believe they're the same as go into the 283.
Okay.
283 Chevy.
I know it's the same as something else, because when you buy it from when you don't buy the Felpro ones, you get the Napa ones. That it says 1975 Chevy. Is that what's the 283 engine? Is that a Chevy engine?
Yes, it is.
Okay, all right. I'm not a car guy, so I don't know that stuff. Okay, all right. It is. Well, that, you know, we glean all this stuff from wherever we can find it, you know, that works on our cars. As a matter of fact, on a T-type, the connecting rods have bolts which are which break. And it turns out that, I don't know, a Ford 302, I don't know, something or other, turns out it's the same bolt. You just got to grind one side of it a little tiny bit and it fits right in. It's just perfect. So here's some friggin' Ford part in a T-type engine. But anyway, but it works and it's better than the original. So, yeah.
John, can I ask you a question from England?
Yes.
When you measure the compression of an engine cylinder by cylinder, is that a proxy for the compression ratio?
It's very difficult to work backwards and say, oh, look, I've got 148 pounds per square inch in my cylinder head. Therefore, my compression ratio is 9.62 to 1. You just can't do that, because you've got the speed at which the engine's turning over and the heat of the engine, the heat of the block. I mean, the air is going to get a little warmer when it gets compressed, but that's not a good way. Normally, you would expect to find on an MGB, you'd expect to find figures somewhere between maybe 110 and 140. I wouldn't expect to get as high as 150, and that's taking all 4 spark plugs out and the compression gauge in one of the holes and spinning the engine over 10 times with a fully charged battery. I mean, you know, I during our technical seminars, when I talk about tuning a car and I talk about compression, checking the compression, if you take the number 1 plug out and put the compression gauge in and test it, you get a figure 105, and then you leave that one out and check the second one. Well, now the starter motor only has to fight 3 compressions, so it's going to be a little higher. And then if you leave that one out and check the third one, the starter motor's only got to go against 2 compressions, and so the apparent compression in each cylinder rises as you go 1, 2, 3, 4. On the other hand, if your battery is just, you know, is about toast, and that's an expression that you must use in England, isn't it? The common breakfast expression.
I think we probably invented it.
Anyway, if the battery is severely discharged and you're checking that number one, it's going ram 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 ram, but by the time you're down to number four, your battery's used up and it's going ram ram ram. You're not going to get the same. So you're after all kinds of things that are consistent. But even with all that consistency, you can't. The only way to calculate it is to take it apart and actually measure it. And then you're only measuring the static compression, because the inlet valve remains open until 56 degrees after bottom dead center on the compression stroke. So what's the effective compression ratio? And that's more like 4-to-1. But anyway, and that's the magic of combining the valve size with the compression ratio and with the duration of the cam. So
that's very useful. Thank you.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
On doing the compression test, you didn't mention having the throttle body open.
I don't.
On motorcycles, that's important on motorcycle engines. I just don't know.
Well,
yeah.
I don't. I've done it both ways. It doesn't seem to make any difference on an MGB. Okay. And the important thing is consistency. We're always after consistency. So if you're going to check two of them, you don't check two of them on a hot engine and go inside and have breakfast and come back out and check the other two on a cold engine. You don't check two of them with the throttles closed and two of them with the throttles open. So, but anyway, it's
okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Don, one thing I've noticed on a compression check, is that obviously you want to be within 10 or 15% through all the cylinders. But I've noticed that most MGBs, if they're about 135 psi, I would consider that a low compression engine. If they're about 145 to 150, I consider that high compression in terms of what fuel to use. So I would run premium in anything over about 145 psi, and just regular in 135 and below.
Yes, I absolutely. And you can only get up to about 90 to 92 at the pump. But you can purchase octane enhancer, and it's not snake oil. It will improve the octane, but it only lasts for the day that you poured it into your gas tank. So if you got a real high compression engine, you can try to get back some Sunoco. What was that? That was about 105 octane or something. That Sunoco 260. That was good stuff.
We do have places that sell racing fuel as well.
Okay. I tell everybody, because people say, oh, you can go to the airport and buy avgas. You can go to the marina if you want to pay $8 a gallon and buy marine gas, which often is non-oxygenated, not alcohol gasohol. And you can buy racing gas. But in all three of those, just keep in mind that when the government wants to get you, they'll get you because you're not paying the road tax on those. Well, all right. Any more questions about cylinder heads?
Yeah, John, is there anything to look at on the rocker assembly shafts or pedestals that may wear or have issues with time?
Well, the rockers have got a brass bushing in them, and the brass ends up holding dirt, and then the dirt is tougher than the steel shaft, so the shaft wears. And you can change the rocker shaft, and you'll find that immediately that makes the rockers feel a whole lot better. You can have the rockers rebushed, there's 8 of them. It's like, oh boy, you know, you got to pay for the bushings, you got to pay to have them pressed in and out, and then fitted to the shaft. And then after they're fitted, you got to have them. You got to have the end of the rocker radiused, because it's a radius on the bottom of the rocker, because it doesn't push the valve, it wipes across the valve. And on a T-type, the rockers have been faced so many times that the case hardening's gone, and you're into soft metal, and they wear, and you look, oh my gosh, they're hollow on the inside where the stem comes up. It's all garbaged up. My machine shop used to weld those. Well, just like with a MIG welder, put a great big gobble weld on them, dress it, and then put that radius back on the bottom, and they were great to go. There's somebody called, he's not the rocker doctor, which would make sense, because there's the damper doctor to get your front pulley re-rubberized. There's the rocker, not the rocker doctor, somebody anyway, and his trick is to take all the pieces, and he goes 10 thousandths over and puts a shaft through that's 10 thousandths larger. It's like cheating on a set of carburetors and buying the 10 thousandths over shafts, and so you don't have to re-bush them. There are, starting with the 18V engines in the middle 2 pedestals, you've got the shims, and for the longest time we argued about why they were there and what to call them besides just shims. So I made up the name anti-tramping shims because it sounds so British. So the anti-tramping shims normally the rocker shaft is just straight, and it can start to pick up vibrations, and it can work hard and it can snap. I've never seen that happen, but they tell me it can. And race stuff is altogether different than street stuff. So if you put those shims underneath the center and just bend it just a little, just put some tension on it, it isn't going to rattle. It's going to stay in place. So that's what those anti-tramping shims are on the 18V engines and the center 2 pedestals. You want to make sure, right, on that rear pedestal on the B series engines, that the oil hole comes up between the 2 studs until 1975, and then it's kicked forward by a 1/4 of an inch or so, and the pedestal changes. And if you get the wrong pedestal with the wrong head, you can block off the oil doesn't end up getting into the rocker shaft. So the original rocker shafts, I think, had screws in the end of them that you could take out. The ones that you get now, I don't know if they're fitted with plugs or not. But the T-type rocker shafts, you can get in upside down and 180 degrees out. It's not too hard to do that. But MGB ones, it's really hard to get them in wrong.
John, I've got 2 questions for you. One is, as I understand it, if the bushings in the rockers are worn, you can get too much oil at the top of the engine because it's leaking out quicker around the shaft. And the second thing, sort of head related, a couple of videos back, you showed the make of your hat. Could you refresh my memory? Because I know it came from England.
Failsworth, Failsworth. And their sales point is called the hat store, the hat shop,
okay,
.co.uk.
Fantastic, thank you. And about the rocker shaft, is that true about too much oil at the top?
Well, you're not going to end up using too much oil. The problem is you're not going to get oil where you want it. So if they're really worn, then by the time you get to the front of the rocker shaft, the pressure isn't there anymore to give you good oiling, and all the oil has been dripping off towards the rears. That's the problem on a T-type. That's altogether different. You can actually use up oil. unless you put a restrictor in on a T-type, where you can actually bleed off oil pressure out of the main gallery. But that doesn't happen on a B engine because you only get spurts, one spurt per turn of the engine, where stuff lines up from the rear cam bearing.
And that would be the same on the A series.
Yeah, it's the same on an A series, only that it's oiled from the front and not from the back. That's the only change.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
John?
Yes.
Is there an aluminum head available for a
There
TD?
is an aluminum head. I think it was made by Pierce. At least years ago it was, like Pierce Manifolds, who bring in all the Weber carburetors. So that's a nice head. There's a couple of advantages to an aluminum head. One is that if it cracks, it won't crack. But if it cracks, you can grind it out and heliarc it and put it back on the engine. So it's totally repairable. And the other deal with it is it dissipates the heat so much more that you can get a higher compression ratio and not have to worry about detonation, pre-ignition. The downside of the aluminum head is that these holes through which the passageways here are larger than this, and the speed of the airflow isn't as great at lower speeds. Therefore, it robs you of a little bit of power on the bottom end, but you get a lot more power on those things. I mean, it's something like 6,000 RPM. There's no substitute for them. But who drives at $6,000? You know, race cars. That's it. So, I didn't mention the cross flow heads for good reason. The cross flow heads they look cool, they sound cool, and you get into it. You go, well, you know, the air's kind of, you know, going in one side and coming out the other. It doesn't have to reverse direction and all that kind of stuff. But if you want to change your oil and get to your oil filter, or if you want to service the distributor and get to the distributor, you even pop the cap off, or adjust the carburetors. It's all but impossible with that cross flow head. It looks cool, sounds cool, but it's just a horror in practical application.
Thank you, John.
Yes, sir. So maybe we got some more questions about cylinder heads, or I've got to get over to the chat section. So, how can it already be 8:30? How can it already be 8:30? And this is only supposed to run to 9. I'll run through the chat, but oh my gosh. So thank you everyone for hanging on, and got 159 people on right now. Marty always counts to see how many people we've got. I think it was up to 170 some earlier. I happened to glance at it, but my eyes are always on the camera here. So in the chat, the first one from John Uhas. I'm getting ready to install the rear axle on my 51 TD after a gear ratio change. I'd like to replace the bushings on the shock link. The top bushing is readily available, but the bottom bushing cannot be found. And apparently the vendors are saying to use the bushing for the top on the bottom too. Apparently the bottom bushing is difficult to remove and replace, requiring special tooling. What's your thoughts? Couple. John, you're still on?
Yes, I am, John.
Yeah, I see your name come through the donations all the time. Thanks. Let's see. First of all, if you've had an MGA crown wheel and pinion installed, your drive shaft is going to be too long. That's just a comment, just to make sure that you're not surprised when you go to put that all back together and you go, why won't my drive shaft collapse enough? And then you must have Girling shocks on the back of the car with that are very, very difficult. You can change those bushings in there. The Lockheed shocked Armstrong shocks they've got normal shock links to them, but the grilling shocks, you have to have the special tool. That's, I don't know what Moss sells that for now. It's just a couple pieces of aluminum, but you use that in a lot of dish soap or something or other to make it squishy. Those things are just a horror to install. They're just awful. I hate them. They're awful to install. So
I had Worldwide do mine on the TC.
Okay. All right. He's got better special tools. So there. You can contact Peter Caldwell at Worldwide Imports and send him your stuff. Of course, you got to put it in the box. Once it goes in the box, doesn't matter where it's going. But he's in Madison, Wisconsin, and or you can try to do it yourself. And I know I've ruined bushings. It's just you got this bullet thing that you're supposed to put on the end of the shock link, and there's, of course, there's no way to push the shock link because it's rounded. Oh my gosh, it's a, well, Fred must have given up and sent his out. So yeah. So I don't, I'm sorry, John, I don't have an easy answer.
Thank you, John.
Okay, and I got a note here from Mike Baldwin. But I don't get it. Mike, you'll have to clue me in on what you mean here.
Oh, that was about an hour and a half ago when the glass was almost full. I said, got Glenfiddich and ready to go.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
All
right. I'm looking at that going, was that some part? Okay. Yeah. I'm not a drinker, you know.
Yeah.
I remember buying what's Hagen pinch, right? And when we're in Vietnam, we could buy a quart of Hagen. They called it Dimple. It wasn't called pinch. And it was, I think it was $3 for a quart because there's no taxes on it, you know. So that was about the only time I ever drank anything other than some beer. So although
pardon me for knackering up your presentation tonight, but I thought some of the others in the chat room might get it.
I'm sure they did. Over my head. Greg with a 70 midget. I'm working on my MGB, taking apart the swivel assemblies. I got the top nut off, but cannot get the top mount off. Any advice? Oh boy. So are you still on, Greg?
I'm here, John.
Okay, so do you have an oxy-acetylene torch?
The hottest thing I have is MAP gas.
No, that's not even close. You'll go through $200 worth of MAP gas. No, you need an oxy-acetylene torch. So we had a special tool that we put in the press that went around the bottom of that top piece, and then we get the torch out, turn that thing all but red hot, and press it out of there. It's a horror. It's a horror. It's awful. And then when you do get it out, you got to use a 5/8 drill bit and clean up the inside diameter. So when you go to reassemble, it all works. But that's just a real bugger. That's just a real bugger. I don't have any hints at all. You can't get a hold of anything. You can't if you put it on a press or you try to fix that top piece and turn it red hot and then hit the kingpin with a hammer. All you do is mushroom the threads. Now it certainly won't go through. So anything you do to hit that, you got to have the nut on the top. Once it starts to move, you're home free, of course. But that's just, it's a real mess. It's a real horror. The only way I know out of it is to turn it cherry red hot. Then sometimes you can unscrew it, walk it off, bang on it. It'll take you a while. I wish I had better better news or a better technique.
Send it out.
Let's let somebody else do it. Yeah, you can buy rebuild kingpin sets. I mean, it's fun to do it yourself. You want to do it all yourself, but to do it yourself, if you're taking it apart, if you're going to put new bushings in, which you don't have to, sometimes you just put a new kingpin in, and of course, it's not the same as putting new bushings and a new kingpin, but it's the kingpin that wears more than the bushing. But yeah, it's just you've got to use great big long bars through stuff to get it loose and get it turning. And if you get a really good vise, you can grab the ears of that trunnion, that top trunnion, turn it red hot while turning it, and someone else is pounding on it. I mean, it's a task. As Fred says, send it out. To whom guys in Milwaukee, they used an awful lot.
Does Apple Hydraulic do those?
I think they do.
Oh, I know Moss sells rebuild kits. I mean, rebuilt ones.
Yes. Yep. There's a my go-to for everything is Sports Car Craftsman in Arvada, Colorado, Denver, Colorado. Sports Car Craftsman, if you're going to put them in a box and send them anywhere, send them there. Glenn can probably do them at Glenn's MG service in St. Petersburg, Florida, also. After you chewed up half a tank of oxyacetylene and burned your fingers 2 or 3 times and hit your thumb once, the $100 that it costs to have it done or whatever it costs is probably worth it. So anyway, wish I had better luck for you.
Okay, sounds like fun.
All right. Don Bueller already asked, is there aluminum head available for TD? Yep. Bradley Schwartz, please comment on using a velocity stack on an MGA carburetor with a stock air filter. Okay, all right. So this is really interesting. So the velocity stack, which is a radius entry to the carburetor, which is part of an MGB. It's that thin aluminum plate that sits on the rear side of the air cleaner and the front side of the carburetor on an MGB. I used to have a box of, I don't know, 300 of them. I mean, somebody's got them out there, and that's the same bolt pattern as an MGA, an H4 carburetor. It fits an HS or an HIF on an MGB, but it'll fit an H-type carburetor. But the problem is it's about that big around, and your air cleaners on the MGA are about that big around. What I did on my MGA was take the rear plate on the MGA. I got the advantage of having a lathe. I was able to chuck it up in the lathe and cut a nice perfect hole on the back side of it. You could probably do that really, really carefully with some other device, and then use that MGB radius. For that, you're going to get almost 2 extra horsepower. Now, 2 horsepower doesn't sound like much, but at the rear axle on your MGB engine, you're getting at the rear wheels. You get a really well-built engine and well-tuned up, you're going to get 60, 65 horsepower at the rear wheels. It's like, is that all? Yep, that's all. But if you add those stacks, you get 2 more horsepower. So it does make all the sense in the world. If you buy the stacks that are about that tall, how is that going to work inside the air cleaner? Because the air cleaner is so thin, how's that air going to get around that horn on the inside of the air cleaner? So I'm not sure that would work. But
You're talking about using those motorcycle type socks on there, I think.
Okay, all right. Okay, but if you're going to use it with a stock filter, that's what he's asked. Velocity stack on an MGA carburetor with a stock air filter. Bradley, you still on here? Don't hear from Bradley. Anyway.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, all right. Anyway, so that's what I did on my MGA, is I cut out the back of the MGA air cleaner and used the MGB radiuses, and then on top of all that, I used nuts and bolts through the air cleaner rather than those friggin' rear bolts which you cannot get to. So I've got bolts that go all the way through. It's pretty handy. If you want to call me tomorrow, I'll send you a picture of my air cleaners on my MGA, just to give you a clue what to do. And you can sure find 2 of those MGB spacers.
Yeah, I'm actually, Barney Gaylord had some plans on his website.
Okay.
So I'm actually in the middle of building a set.
Okay.
So if I get them done and they work, I'll send you a photo.
Okay. On those stacks,
yeah.
There's a gentleman in the UK that was selling them, and it's basically the same printout that Barney has on his website. I've got a set on my 58, and boy, they are nice.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks.
So Doc Rosebeer is come in here. I've seen the pictures of MGBs rolling as they corner. I'm considering an uprated anti-roll bar, especially got a 72 with a 9/16 roll bar. Will I notice the change going up to a 5/8? Probably not that much. That they used, Doc, they used that 5/8 on the BGT. So if you want to make a real difference, you go to a 3/4. But I don't know what the downside of this is. I mean, there's always, if a 3/4 works, why not go to 1.5 inches? You take it out to its extreme, and I'm not sure that I know they sell 3/4 bars.
Yeah.
The problem with the 3/4 bar is that I don't think it's a factory bar. I don't think you can hook it up the same way a factory one is hooked up. And the factory ones are so nice because the way they fit and so forth. On the other hand,
John, Adco has sway bars, and you want to know the downside? I have a 15/16 in the front, a 3/4 in the rear. Handles really well, stays flat, but boy, does it ride hard. It does change the ride. So if you don't like that, I wouldn't recommend it. But if you're interested in the way it handles, it's just beautiful. And Adco stands behind the 2 brackets in the back where you put on their sway bar. After 20 some years, one of them broke. So I called to see if I could buy one. And he sent me, well, we got a new style. So he sent me both the old and the new style for free. They stand behind their products. I was impressed.
Adco, I've heard their name. Yep. So there's no definitive. Yes.
Okay.
If you stiffen up one end of the car without stiffening the other, that just changes whether you're going to get more or less oversteer or understeer. If you stiffen the front end, you're going to get understeer.
Okay, we're into an area that I don't understand. So, okay, but the point, I know it's 77 through 80, they put on 3/4 bars front and rear, at least the 3/4 rear, and those are nice. I mean the center of gravity is higher on the car, so I figured that's what they did to make it stay steady. But I didn't know about the understeer and oversteer. So those are all considerations, Doc. So
okay,
filter through all that and yeah.
I'll keep thinking about it then.
Okay, all right. Okay, from Walt Ocon. Do you have the Felpro part number for XPAG? Let me look and see if I do. I don't know if I do or not. Hang on just a second. My textbook, which I say someday I'm going to reprint, but I haven't yet. Just a minute here. Let me see what I can come up with for the T-type cylinder head. umbrella seals, Velcro, SS 72522. It should be as easy to remember as 70373. 72522. Sounds like a zip code. Wonder where 72522 is at. Sevens. Arkansas? Where's sevens? Oklahoma? Anyway, 72522 Felpro X-Pag oil seals.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome. Gil Dupre, do you recommend spring or solid valve lifter arm spacers? So Gil, are you on?
Yeah. I'm here.
Okay, great. So the idea is that if you got springs, and this is especially true on a T-type, you've got springs that push out against the rockers, so the rockers can't float back and forth; they stay in place. But if you've got spring tension against them, you're going to create some heat every time those things are moving. There's heat, and you want the heat at the rear wheel. You want that heat to not dissipate inside the engine and into the radiator. You want it to get to the rear wheels. So you can make spacers that go around the shaft that are within, give me a size, 5/10 thousandths of the what's that?
Boss sells them. I put them in my 8.
Okay, all right.
I put them in my 8. Right. I just wanted.
You make them yourself or do you buy them?
I bought some Boss ones and then shaved them down a little bit. But it made the clearance was real close. Yeah.
Okay,
so they great.
They work. I don't think that you could put that engine on a dynamometer and tell that you've done that. So
I was noticing the spring was kind of, kind of springy. It works beautifully inside.
It's
That's how I get my head and put it on it. I put new shit up and everything again, but I put the spacer in it. They own it as
It certainly makes sense.
Float around
I get a real hard time with your audio connection here, but anyway, they're available. Gil got them from Moss, so they work.
Better alignment on the lifter. On the between the lifters and the lifter rod, they seem to get in the middle better rather than seeing wear, kind of across the wear on the lifters. I resurfaced the lifters a little bit.
Okay, all right. So the audio is so dreadful here. It's real hard to understand one word from the other. But anyway, we'll thank you very, very much, Gil. And Ben Andrews has got a list on here, head cross reference by casting number from Flow Speed. That's Sean Moore out in Oregon. And then Terry Loof. Is that no, T Loof. Is that Terry Loof? How do you measure the displacement? So you need one of two things. You either need a burette. Remember that from a chemistry class. It's a long tube with a valve on the bottom, and it's a graduated cylinder. And you use a piece of glass. That's the easier way to do it. And you turn the cylinder head upside down. You put a spark plug in there so that the water, your fluid doesn't run out. You put a drop of detergent, dish detergent in the burette, fill it up with water. It foams for a while. You let all those little bubbles settle away. Put grease on the cylinder head, put the glass on it, and leave just a little bit of a crack on one side, tip the cylinder head just a little bit so that crack is at the high point, and then you turn the valve and you drool the fluid in until that whole combustion chamber is filled, and then you do it 3 times to make sure that you've done it correctly. You blow the fluid out each time. So that requires a burette, or you can go to I don't know how big of a syringe you can get. You know, if you get a 1cc syringe, you're going to be there all day. You're going to lose track. You're only going for what did I say? Maybe 24 cc's up in there. Is that right? 24 or 42? Fred, you help me out on that. Or 42 maybe.
42 on the stock motor.
Yeah, thank you. So anyway, that's a lot of 1cc syringes. I think you can probably get, maybe if you can find a 50cc syringe, and again, you know, you just put water in it and you shoot it in and fill it up. Same thing on top of the block. You put a little grease on top of the block. You put your plate, your glass plate on it, wide glass plate, so you can see where the bubble is. And then especially with the engine, you think it's a top dead center, but you get it almost all the way full, and then you turn the engine a little bit back and forth until that bubble is at its least, and fill it up, and you can get the displacement at the top of the block and at the top of the head. And then for the cylinder head, you can either take a figure of 4.5 or 5 cc's, that works, or you can take I'm going to hit the mute all button. See how nice that is. So here's I traced out the cylinder head on here, counted the squares, calculated the area. I did that here too. Calculated the area, and then got the thickness of the head gasket, which I think I figured was where's the thickness of the area here? The thickness of the gasket. I've got it's about 50 thousandths thick, I figured. And on this one I got 4 cc's. That's what on this gasket. So I calculated that from measuring the counting the squares and doing all that kind of work, and then you put it into the formula. Anyway, those are where you get your raw numbers. And of course, if the piston's in overbore, then it's 3.16. If you're 40 thousandths over, it's 3.2, and your length of your stroke at 3.5 inches, and you get your displacement and so forth. So anyway, that's how you measure. That's how you measure it and calculate. So Bradley Schwartz has got ARP, ultra torque fastener assembly lubricant. So this is something to use on the threads. That's there in the note. And Ben Andrews, on your rebuilds, do you replace cylinder head studs on a B series engine? No, absolutely not. Stock compression, same question on rod bolts. ARP are nice products, but how often do you go that route? Never. Now, if you're building a race engine, go for it. If you've got a couple of studs that are something's terribly wrong with them, go for it. But those of us who've been in the trade long enough remember about 20 years ago when one of the major suppliers was offering brand new cylinder head studs, and they snapped at about 30 pounds. It's like nothing goes wrong. Now T-type, that's different. Those aren't hardened, or that they're real soft and they stretch. But the MGB, the B series and the A series studs are just great. There's nothing that goes wrong with them. Chase the threads on them, reuse them.
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, yeah. Rocker arm specialists in Northern California will rebush rockers and can hard face rocker valve surfaces. Rocker arm specialists in Northern California. So Greg, thank you for putting that in there. Is it worth replacing head bolts with new ARP ones? No, I just don't. I just don't do that. MG Limited, that's the people I was trying to think of in Milwaukee, who do a lot of kingpins. MG Limited in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They do a lot of MG work, and the answer was they never had to replace new bolts, I suppose studs and stuff like that. So our cars just don't. Race car, that's altogether different, but just straightforward stuff. Okay. So this is Mr. Curl, who said, I always use ARP head studs in Conrod bolts on rebuilds, and it comes from twisting a B engine to 7,500 RPM on a race car. So, yep. I agree. I agree with that. Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. So I've got a formula, which is dollars equals
5 years old.
Power times, I've got to hit the mute all button here because I get some background noise, but dollars equal power times reliability times efficiency all over emissions. So if you want your engine to be more powerful, you can just add money, or you can lose efficiency, raise emissions. It's a simple little formula, but it's just absolutely true. But I have yet to win a Nobel Prize for coming up with that. But if you want to run your engine at 7,500 RPM to get that extra power out of it, you got to put a lot of money into it so it stays together. That's the balancing and the extra durability and all those studs.
I unmuted. This is George Curl.
Yes.
Yeah. You're exactly right. As far as throwing money at it, but over time you learn what to throw money at.
Yes.
Certain areas you throw a lot of money in, especially the head. In certain areas you just kind of leave it alone, and you get a lot of 33 years out, a lot of real good reliability.
Excellent.
I lost 4 engines, and all of them were my own fault.
Okay.
Have you ever seen a Conrod go through the side of a block?
Oh, yeah.
Did it still have part of the crank on it?
No, you got me there. You got me there. I've got part of a flywheel. I've got a broken part of a flywheel. That's a real dangerous thing to come apart.
Yeah, I was lucky never lost a flywheel. I have and I will send it to your email address. It's a spreadsheet on figuring out compression ratio.
Okay.
And all you have to do is plug your numbers into it. But I'll have to go to the website, your website, and put it up.
Okay.
I guess get your email address. I'll send it to you.
You put it up on Facebook and everybody can see it. Or my email address is my name, John Twist, JOHNTWIST, at universitymotorsltd.com. And
I'll send it there.
Okay, great. That's on both of the websites too. So yeah, thank you very much, George.
Yeah, well, thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
John, I got this from a mechanic. I don't know if you can see it. A valve in a valve.
Yep, I see the valve in the valve. That's good. That's yep.
I don't know what it's from. I got it from John Kuhar. He said, "Hey, you want this?" And so I took it.
So the valve broke, fell into the cylinder, and the piston pushed it up through the other one. That's pretty impressive. That's I don't have that. I've got
never seen that before.
Okay. Steve Lepofsky says Worldwide does an excellent job on damper rebuilding. They do. And Facundo, hi, John, just replaced the fuel filter and hoses because of a small leak. And now the leak is much worse. No idea what could be the cause. Well, me either, because I don't have enough information here. Are you still on? We're down to 112.
Hi, John. Yes, I'm still here.
Yes. Where's the leak from?
So I replaced this fuel filter because of a small leak. I see if you can see it.
Okay.
Right here. And so when I put a new one, basically the leak was coming, it was more noticeable, and it was coming from the hoses. Like this is the hose right here.
What year do you have?
MGB 1970.
Okay.
And I just bought it, so I'm new to the MG world, and this is the first thing, my first project, and I thought it was going to be something easy. And basically, I replaced, I looked on MG Experience, and I looked at the instructions on how to do it, and it seemed fairly simple until I changed everything, and everything started to come, a lot more fuel started to come. And then I went back to the old clamps and the old filter, see if that would be, and it was just, then it was just like coming a lot more.
Well, maybe the new filter is faulty. I mean,
right.
the hoses don't leak, and if the hose clamps are tightened enough, they're not going to leak. But we know where those filters are all made, right? So,
right.
quality control isn't as great as it is in other places sometimes.
Exactly.
So
I did go back to the same the old filter, and it just, it seemed like everything was the same basically. So, yeah, so that's why I was thinking. I thought it could be the new filter, because it's like, it looks like a cheap piece of plastic. But when I went back to the old filter, it was just the same. It was pretty bad. Yeah.
Could I make a suggestion?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
My suggestion is get a longer hose and just leave the filter out. See if it leaks, and if it doesn't leak, that means it's the filter.
Okay. All right.
Bradley, thank you very much.
All right.
Yep, substitution. Yep. So where are you calling from?
I'm from Washington, D.C.
Okay.
But originally from Argentina, so that's,
Okay, got it.
All right.
Okay. All right. There's a big MG club in Washington, D.C.
Yes, and I did join at the beginning of the year, so I'm looking forward to. Yeah.
Good, wonderful. Okay.
John?
Yes.
The diameter of the hose, make sure it's the same.
Thank you, George. Thank you. Originally, a 1970 doesn't have a fuel filter. Originally, it doesn't have one. But you should have one, because there's all the junk in the tank and everything. But the inlet to the carburetor is 1/4 inch, and very easily the outlet from the fuel line is 5/16 of an inch. So anyway, thanks, George, for maybe that's going on too. So.
All right. Yeah, I will try to figure it out. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Marty's got some stuff on here. She keeps putting stuff on. Mr. Nakos, Jim Nakos, I replaced the handbrake cable today on my 63B. No problem with the cable, but after taking out the right seat to get access to the cable guide mounting nut, I noticed that the seat cover had been rubbing on the lower part of the handbrake handle and shredded the vinyl on the seat bottom. It seems like it should be too simple to be hard. I noticed that the seat frame is bowed more on one side than the other. There must be a left and right seat. Yes, there is. There is. So I switched the driver's seat to the handbrake side, But now that bowed side rubbed on the door sill, yeah, because the seat bottoms are different. I even made up the oak patching strips that were missing, and that made no difference. What could I be missing? So are you still on here, Jim?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so help me out. The handbrake handle is rubbing the bottom of the seat and has destroyed the fabric.
Yeah, the passenger seat, whoever tried to adjust it, whenever you try to adjust it forward or backward, it rubs on that weld part where the stud is welded to the bottom of that handle. And so I said, well, I'll just look at I figured the flat side of the other seat, somebody must have switched seats at one time because the carpet is new. And I thought they put the wrong one on the wrong side, but that didn't work. And I said, well, maybe it needs to be lifted. So I made up the oak strips and that didn't work.
So other things is the seat shifted too far to the left towards the tunnel? Is the seat altogether in the wrong place? Your bolt holes in the floorboard, so that you theoretically you can't get that wrong. Has the seat been built correctly? Is it squished down too much? Is it bulged out there, and that's why it's rubbing? And then if all that fails, then the cheap trick is a piece of masonite in there, just a little tiny triangular piece or something or other, just to stick in there, so it doesn't do any more damage to the seat. But the seat bottoms are different, left and right.
Yeah, I put the passenger one back on the passenger side where it came from.
Yeah.
And it's about an hour before the seminar started tonight, I resorted to a large persuader and got that side in a little bit. So I didn't get a chance to put it back in because your seminar started here. But
okay,
I'm going to go give it a try later on tonight.
Oh boy. Okay. All right. Well, get back in touch with you. Take some pictures and send it to me. There's no substitute for seeing is believing. I mean, oh my gosh, I'll talk to somebody on the phone and talk to them for a long time, and finally say, well, you want to FaceTime or can you send me some pictures? And they'll send me a picture, and I go, no wonder it doesn't work. It's hooked up wrong. I mean, just straightforward stuff like that.
Well, I thought it should be so simple. There's nothing to it. I mean, there really shouldn't be anything to it. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So Greg with the 70 Midget says 72522, which is the Felpro seal for the T-type engine. The zip code is Copperas, Texas. Thank you. Well, I got to Oklahoma. That's as close as I got. Rocker arm specialists in California. We've got that. I'm buzzing down, and I'm at the end. I am at the end here of our chat section. So it's only 9:04. This often drifts on. So if anyone's got any other questions, you can ask. Whether it's about cylinder heads or tire pressures or piston diameters or.
Yeah, John, the only thing I wanted to mention, I heard you say earlier that you were in Vietnam. I wanted to thank you and all the other veterans that are on here tonight for your service.
Oh gosh, it's very kind. All that stuff you read about American GIs being spit on and there were no parades, and not my experience at all.
Well,
when I got back,
it was mine when I came back to the States. I experienced that, and
okay.
I have a real hard problem with the people that did that, but that's my problem. So, but I didn't ask for the war. I didn't ask for any of that. We just had to do our service. But anyway, thank you.
We in the state of Michigan sent all veterans who had served during the Vietnam conflict. They didn't want to get into were you there or were you not. If you served during that time, the state of Michigan sent you a check for, I don't know, $150. And my hometown did have a parade. I don't remember it was a parade of Vietnam guys, but I remember I was in the parade. And it was probably Independence Day, maybe 1971 or 75 or some probably after the Vietnam conflict. But anyway, that's very kind. Thank you. My son served in Afghanistan. It didn't work out so well for him, but my dad was in World War II, so we got a whole yeah, a whole family of Army guys here, and all of us joined. So,
well,
Steve,
I'll forgive
Steve,
you for being in the Army. I was in the Navy, but
so
Good man.
Steve, thank you for your comment. Remember, it's not your problem; it's our problem.
exactly.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Yeah, I wasn't even allowed to wear my uniform when I came back. That's because they told me there was a lot of
trouble at the airport
protesting going on, and in order to not get into conflict and wear civilian clothing. I mean, here I am, a 21-year-old kid, all hyped up, piss and vinegar and everything, and I can't wear my uniform. Really?
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. I remember when they were stitching those uniforms and doing all this stuff. And I remember guys saying, as soon as I get to the airport, I'm taking this thing off and throw it in the trash. I'm thinking all this money that the government's spending to send you home in uniform, the proud boys that we were. So I often do more often than not, when Doug Clark is on, but I haven't seen Doug tonight. So I don't know if Doug's on tonight or not, but we usually have a hat contest. And I brought my hat today, which is a real tough one. But the reason I brought it out, I probably can't see, but on the inside, it says USN. So this is Army surplus, well, not Army surplus, I guess it's Navy surplus, huh? But anyway.
That's probably the one I'm missing, yeah.
Yeah. The one they sold off, yeah. Anyway, that's very kind. Thanks for mentioning that. I was with my wife and 4 kids. We were on the mall in DC, doing all the stuff, and there are very few vendors there. And there's some guy there selling pins, Army pins, right at the base of the Lincoln Memorial. And I thought, well, as long as I'm here, I'll buy a 25th Infantry Division pin. I didn't have one, so the guy says to me, he says, "Are you serving the 25th?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Welcome home." I said, "Well, it's just like that, 30 years too late." But anyway, it's very kind. Thanks for saying that.
John?
Yes, George.
I have a overdrive transmission. What do you call it?
LH or
LH, and we lost the main shaft. Right where the needle bearings are, it snapped right off.
Ooh, okay.
And it is obsolete, and we're looking for one.
All right, Sports Car Craftsman, Denver, Colorado. And there is you can also go directly to Overdrive Services in Sheffield, England. They got a website, and they're responsive. They'll answer your question. It's out there. You just got to find it.
Okay. Thank you.
Rather than having, I don't think you even have a real one machined, because you've got the larger splines on the back end there. So that's pretty weird to see that snapped off. That must be a lack of oil at some point in the past. From the
I lost second gears. Basically, it wouldn't go into second.
Okay.
It would go into second if I was idling, but if I was moving, it wouldn't go into second. And that's exactly what happened.
Okay.
You can try quantum mechanics in Connecticut as well.
Sure.
Quantum mechanics.
John Esposito. He's been on here a couple of times. Every time we talk about gearboxes or anything, he always comes on. So, yeah, Quantum Mechanics, Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you.
John?
Yes.
I had a question about what's going on with my air filter.
I love it. Was that oiled? Did you oil that up?
No, it pulled out into the carburetor. I took it off the carburetor, and that was holding the piston up.
That's pretty good. I love that. That's nice.
So why did it do that?
Well,
let go.
No, when I say that's not the filter itself. That's the piece that goes between the filter and the backing plate.
Right. Yeah, there's a one on either side of the filter.
I always put those on with grease. Anybody who's worked with me knows that I use grease just out the wazoo, but I have no idea. I have no idea why Steve, I have no idea why that would happen. That is so bizarre. That is so, and it was the front one, because the rear one's held in place with the oh, you got the MGB thing in there. Hey, how cool is that?
That's the ones that Steve Giles made in England.
Okay, all right.
So that's the subset radius.
Yep, that's it. That's it. I have no idea why that would have happened. I've never seen that before.
Okay.
Fred's the SU guy. What do you think, Fred?
I have no idea why that would come loose like that.
I'll replace both of them and
it probably won't happen again. You know, for all the stuff you see, there's something always the next day, you know, that you see, you just go, how would that even happen?
The only thing I had when I was in the Navy, coming back from Philadelphia to Boston, driving the MGA, I lost one of the bolts holding the air filter in place, and it rotated down and closed off one carburetor. But I was able to get out there and put another bolt in and fix it.
Yeah. We sometimes you don't notice, you know, especially, you know, like TFs and MGAs, you know, is just getting those air filters into place. They got a gasket between the air filter and the carburetor, so you need it. I mean, talk about a place where you don't need a gasket. But anyway, there's a gasket, so you're obligated to put the gasket in. And if you use a lot of grease on it, it stays in place. But if you don't, sometimes the gasket falls out of place, and then you put the bolts so you wouldn't even know. And all there is just a little strip of paper, which you don't notice when you're driving at 30 miles an hour. But when you try to get it up to 70, you know, it's just such an impediment to get in the air through the carburetor. So yeah, I remember when that guy called me when he was on the expressway going home. I remember that. Yeah. That's pretty good, Steve. Any other interesting comments or questions here? We're down to our Judd isn't on tonight. He must be out driving his car. He's always out driving his T-type. So
I've got one, John.
Yes.
However, I can't get my camera turned around. I apologize. I'm on my phone. I've got a 58 MGA, just fresh overhaul, everything, carbs, everything. And the first 100 miles it ran fine, and then it started to sputter under power, and then eventually it would sputter and die. And I could lift the hood, give it 10 minutes. I'm assuming vapor lock because it was hot out. Close the hood. Yep, it runs again. However, I took it out crazily. It was just 38 or 40 degrees out. Went around the block and it did it again. And I didn't expect that at that temperature. And I don't know if that's a fuel issue problem or what I'm looking at to chase down.
Well,
points are electronic ignition.
It's what?
Points or electronic ignition.
Points.
Change your condenser.
Okay.
Thank you. It's hard. It's hard to do that, and just because you put another condenser in there doesn't mean it's going to run better, because not all condensers are good out of the box. I had a guy call me from Atlanta shop years ago, and the guy goes, "This guy's, you know, the car's backfiring, it's snapping and popping." He says, "Just bad condenser, absolutely." He says, "I put another condenser in there." He says, "It's still doing the same goddamn thing, you know." And what do you suppose is the problem? I've been working on this for 2 days. I can't figure it out. And I see you got a bad condenser. He says, well, I just put a new one in there. And I said, I mean, what's it sound like to you? Well, it sounds like a bad condenser. I said, so change the condenser again. And this is before all the condensers were bad. So he went to Napa and got another condenser and put it in there. And it was done. He called me up. He says, I don't know why I didn't think of that. So just, the part should be good, when you buy the new fuel sending unit and put it in your gas tank, it ought to read correctly, but they don't. So yeah,
Thank you.
All right, there you go. You got something turned around now. Yeah, different picture on there instead of the Golden Gate Bridge. It looked like the Golden Gate. So.
Going to be back in 2 weeks.
Go ahead.
Yeah, around 2 weeks. Yes, I can't. I'm not sure. I'm going to Gulf Shores. Just a second here. Let me look and see what's going on here. So I'm looking at February, and the fifth is almost too soon. The 12th is certainly the 19th. Absolutely, the 19th we'll have one. But I don't know whether we're going to have just one during the month or two. I will have just arrived in Gulf Shores next week on Monday, and I may not be set up to do one. On the 12th, I'm going to be coming back from a tech seminar that I'm doing in St. Petersburg with Glenn Lenhard. That ought to be a treat. If you can come to that, Glenn and I both have our attitudes, and it ought to be fun to hear us argue back and forth about how to fix stuff. And actually, we'll be tuning up in MG, actually doing it. The 19th is open, the 26th is open, maybe even the 4th will be, I'm not sure. So anyway, certainly the 19th. That'll be our next time, absolutely. But I'm not sure about the rest of the dates yet. I just don't know yet.
I was just going to say that we had a celebration of John's 49th year of business a week ago. So 49th birthday of University Motors, opening in 1975. So next year's a big one. But last year was John's 50th year as a mechanic. So the business is 2 years behind his career.
So it's the MG was came out and hit the market in 1925. That's what everybody said and everybody believed. Certainly the advertising guys, because they put that sticker on the 1975 MGBs, the golden anniversary ones and all that kind of stuff. And then a couple of years ago, they were campaigning to, they could have this big 100th anniversary of the MG. And Norm Ewing, who almost always sends me a note from South Africa saying that he can't be on because they got power shedding there. And their power company in South Africa, I think at one time was the 4th largest company in the world. They sold electricity to Egypt. I mean, it was massive. And now it's just oh my gosh! Now they don't even have enough power to keep the power on at night. Anyway, he and several other people campaigned heavily with the car club and said, no, it wasn't 1925, it was 1923 because Kimber had put the MG logo on some Raworths or something or other. Anyway, so how do you date me? The first time I took money for doing working on an MG, probably prematurely, but that's when I first took it. Tom Lang, who works out of Maine, he and I had teamed up and fixed the guy's TD in May of 1971. I think we charged the guy $363, as I remember. A lot of money. And so that's when I entered the trade, and then I worked in England in 72, 73, and right when I got back from 73, I took out a DBA with a Kent County here in Grand Rapids, doing business as University Motors. And so that dates from maybe July or August of 73. But I opened for full time when I took the plunge and said, this is what I'm doing full time, January 25th, 1975. So that's when I officially date my business from.
And our head count tonight was 183 people at 747. That was the highest we had.
All right. Okay. Well, we're about done here. We got no more questions. And so it's 9:21. I don't know what we'll do next time. You can always send me an email and give suggestions. Tony Shoviak was the one who said let's talk about old vendors. I think Tony was the one, and so we did. SU carburetors are always hot. Anyway.
Well, you can always talk about suspension. You haven't hit that yet for a while.
Okay. All right. Okay. We'll talk about suspension. Yeah. Caster, camber, toe in, shocks, rack and pinion steering. There's a lot to talk about. Sure. Absolutely.
Suspense.
Cool. Thank you.
That's one of the biggest threads in the whole car. On a later Model B or on a B on the rack. That's that thread is that the end screws onto. That's 1 inch. I got a die for that. It's not a 118. I don't think it's quite that coarse. It's finer than that, but it's not 30 either. It's not something ultra fine. But I'll have to look and see. All right, I'm geeked. I'm all set to go. So,
hey John.
Yes,
John. What was the warranty on a brand new MG in the mid '70s when you're just starting business? Did the people come to you after the 1 year warranty? If it was a year,
they came to me before their warranty was up.
What?
They came to me before the warranty was up. Guy goes, he said, I've had it with a dealer. You know what you're doing, and hey. So I've got a letter. I just took it up to the office today from a guy, and this is dated 1980, and he's from St. Louis, and he wrote to me. This is email. This is within the past year or two. He says, I want to remind you. He says, I bought my my MG new in 1980 from the dealer in St. Louis. JRT was getting real shaky. Maybe it was 81. And he said, when it was cold, I couldn't get it into reverse and skate. And the dealer, every time they'd try it, they said, there's nothing. They didn't want to do a warranty on it. And he said, I called you and you wrote a letter on your stationery, and I took it to the dealer, and the dealer passed it up the line or something or other. And they said, all right, we'll accept a warranty claim. And it was a burr on the spigot bush. So, they rubbed that away and took care of the problem. Anyway.
Wow. Well, they have to pay you when they can get the same service for free. That says a lot. That says a lot.
But that was done in about that didn't last any longer than about 1982. I don't remember when JRT collapsed, but it wasn't too much longer after that. By 85, the original University Motors had closed because they didn't have cars to sell, and the land was worth more than they could extract out of it, repairing and selling vehicles.
Huh.
Yeah, cool. The original University Motors, the Bradstock had a handshake agreement with Kimber, and they got a cut on every MG sold in England south of the Midlands. They all, at least paperwork wise, they all went through University Motors. University Motors was a sales agent for MG. That's why at the end of the MGC production, when they were still left with the numbers are all over the board about how many MGCs were left unsold. It turned out it wasn't that many; it was a couple of hundred. But sometimes you hear people talk about 1,000 or so. They just couldn't get rid of them. Motor magazines had written up such dreadful stuff about them that they pushed them all off on the university and said, "This is your problem. You get rid of them." So anyway, they were gone in 85. So yeah, I wouldn't have been doing it. But I remember people coming around and just saying, we were probably at $8 an hour then too. Of course, $8 was different.
Yep. Yeah. So, wow. So that's interesting. So people are buying brand new British cars, even though the company's out of business.
Well,
essentially,
they quit making MG in 1980 and took all the remaining resources that they had and pointed them towards Triumph, the shape of things to come, the Bullet, the TR7.
I bought one. I bought one new in 80.
Okay, all right.
Within the first year, the right spindle, the tire beat me to the toll gate, to the toll booth. It came off and went ahead of me, and the spindle went down to the ground. That was less than a year old. I was pissed. I never had a brand new British sports car before. I said, let me get one before they go out of business. Jeez.
Well, we are so fortunate that they badged the TR7 as a Triumph. They could have badged it as anything.
Huh.
Glad they didn't badge it as an MG. That would have been a difficult. That would have been difficult to talk about. But within MG, there's such a history. I mean, the rear wheel bearing on a TD fits a 1980 MGB. You know, there's a continuity of there's not a lot. There's not. I mean, front suspension wise, it's the same. Well, it's not, but the ARM bushings are the same part number. The whole setup is the same. I mean, you go from Whitworth threads to American threads to the kingpins that they were using on the T types and the A's to the much more durable B kingpins. So much better. But you know, it's had a rack and pinion. So anyway, the ARMs are the same. The ARMs from a TD will fit a 1980 MGB. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks for tonight.
The TR7 had the best heater of any car that they ever put out.
I didn't know it long enough to find out, John.
We had one.
John, there's so many. I know at least 2 or 3 British car mechanics that became British car mechanics because no one would work on their cars, and they're pretty simple. They're easy to work on. Steve Shivington is one. You know, nobody work on a car. Okay, I'll do it myself, and they end up making a living.
That's where most of us came from. I took the plunge. I decided in 1971 that was what I was going to do for a living. Pretty early on.
Were you scared about that decision? That's a big decision for a young man to make.
I was in love. I was in love. Love is blind.
What was her name? Yeah. Her name was MG.
Her name was MG. You know, been married to her since. You know, so wow. Yeah. And even though I step out sometimes, you know, and touch a Healy or a Triumph or something, but you know, at the shop on Fulton Street, we had some interesting cars come through. As long as it was British, we'd take it in. Kurt always worked on the weird stuff, the Reliant Scimitar and the Bond and just the 3-wheelers and then we had a 1929 or 27, I can't remember, Daimler V12 sleeve valve, not poppet valve, sleeve valve. The guy was 80 years old who owned the car, and he'd taken the engine totally apart at the age of 70, and then finally come to the realization at the age of 80 that he could not reassemble it. And he came to me and he said, "Can you put this engine back together and get it back in my car?" And I said, "Well, can you write checks?" And he said, "Yep." So you can do it. We can do it. So yeah. So we worked on the weird stuff. We worked on that Daimler and worked on an Invicta, Rolls Royce and Bentley.
What's the name of the car that?
And sorry, we're unmuted. So yeah, fun stuff. Rovers, Rovers where the front coil springs don't go up and down, they go horizontally. I mean, there's all different kinds of front suspensions, and that's certainly one. So the advantage of that Rover is they had that 3,500 cc engine, that old Buick Skylark engine. That's where some of those came from to power the Costello MGBs, the first V8s.
Did you ever work on a Turner? It's a picture on the calendar. I'd never heard of one before.
No, I don't even know. I don't know even where it fits in.
Somebody told me they had a Spitfire engine. I don't know. It didn't seem like it, but yeah, I saw it on a car show, and I said, "It's a British car. I'm putting it on the calendar." I never saw one before.
I got your calendar. Thank you very kindly. It's up in
Did you enjoy August?
August was nice. Listening with the speed wrench. Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was humorous.
Yeah. Well, look, it's 9:30, and so we're down to 68 diehards who just won't quit. So anyway, thank you very, very kindly. Hit the PayPal button before you go to bed. They still remember, and thank you all very, very kindly for being in touch and communing and offering information and asking important questions. And the next time we will talk about front suspensions.
Hey, thank you
for that.
Can't wait till the weather changes. I can put my transmission back in.
Yeah, okay.
Let you know if it works.
All right. Thank you, John. Good night. Catch you.
Thanks, John. Good night.
Steve, thank you.
Thank you, John.
Marty, thank you. Greg Fisher, thanks for being there. I'd argue with your air cleaner. I'm not sure that really helps getting the air inside that engine. I put those pancake K&N triangular ones on there. Ron, nice to see you. Ron Nugent. Yep, nice to see you tonight.
Good night, John.
Hey, good night, Crystal. Didn't hear from you until right now. So
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
We on for our call tomorrow night, 5 o'clock?
Oh shit, I forgot all about that. Yes. Thank you for reminding. Oh my God. Yep, well, I get it right there. Yep. Thank you.
I sent an email to you today, so you can check up on that.
Okay, I haven't seen it yet. So yeah, thank you. I've got a tech seminar going, and next time we meet, I'll talk about the one in Philadelphia. How many people you got signed up there, Roger?
So far, we're probably around maybe 32.
Oh my gosh!
Because this will be for the two separate days, so we're splitting that in half.
All right. Okay.
Because we just put out a call to some of the other local clubs, and we've got some response from there as well to fill in some spaces.
Okay. All right.
But we'll be. I sent you an email. It'll tell you who's on the call.
Okay.
Give you the bio. Give you the bio of Ryan, and we'll just wanted to touch base.
Yeah.
And see you, check with you guys and introduce and see what the requirements are to make sure we're all on the same page.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I'm driving or flying. If I'm driving, I'll bring my own tools. But
all right.
Flying is that's always interesting to fly with tools. Although I'm not the only one. You just can't take them as carry on. So anyway, okay, Roger, we'll do. So
all right, very good.
Nice to see you on tonight. You didn't say anything, but sometimes you're at the McDonald's, there's too much background noise or something.
We're still hanging out at McDonald's. I'm down in Naples, Florida. It's like 70 degrees down here, so everything.
Cool. Nice. All right. Well, everyone, thank you very kindly. And Crystal, thanks for being here. And Ron and John DeCarli, you see your name a lot. So Doug Miller, thank you. John Uhas, thank you too. Bradley, Harry Simmons, thanks. Stu Colt. If it weren't for Stu Colt, my son Brooks would not have learned the periodic table of elements. He recited those. You can go on YouTube, look under, on YouTube, you look for What's the link? Twisty, I think it's Twisty, Twisty, Twisty Kid Genius. You see my son, who must be, I don't know, 6, blindfolded, reciting the entire periodic table.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Yep. So a parlor trick. I sent it off to Letterman because they were doing stupid kid tricks then. Not that it was stupid, but it was certainly a kid trick. And
the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
The stupid part, yeah. And and they called me from Letterman. They called me on a Sunday afternoon. That was kind of weird. From New York, and said we don't do this anymore, but if you don't mind, we'll send this thing off to, it was like America's Funniest Home Videos. So it was on TV. It was on the, I know no one remembers it. Just after a baby walking around with toilet paper hanging from its butt. So, that's where it rated there. But anyway, Twisty Kid Genius. It's on YouTube, and I did that because it's too cold. Who suggested that I teach my a long ballad, which is hot in Canada, or was the Ballad of Sam McGee, something like that. And but since we're not Canadian, I didn't go that, but I chose something else. Anyway, I'm just waxing on, chewing up time here. So anyway, thank you very, very much for being here tonight. And I will check in with everybody. We'll all check in together again soon, and we'll talk about front suspensions. Good idea. So thanks. And until then, safety fast.
Thank you, John. Good night.
Thanks, John.
Good night, everyone.